Good morning, everyone, and welcome to LSND Live Community Conversations. My name is Jen Lee. I am the Executive Director at LSND, and I am so happy to be joined this morning by Scott Burlingame from Independence Inc. here in Minot. Scott, welcome to LSND Live.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on, Jen. I appreciate this opportunity.
I'm so excited to hear you do so many great things. I'm excited for everyone else to hear about that too. So, Scott, just give us a little bit of background introduction about yourself and what Independence Inc. is.
Sure. I'll start with Independence Inc. because that's way more interesting. Independence Inc. We're a peer-driven nonprofit, a center for independent living. We're one of four centers for independent living in North Dakota. There's one sort of in each quadrant of the state. Each of us are locally controlled private nonprofit organizations, but we all kind of provide the same general framework of independent living services. We work with all ages, all types of disabilities. So in fact, this year we have a competition to see who's going to serve the youngest and oldest person in the office. Last year, I believe our oldest was in their upper 90s and our youngest was 4 months old. So
Wow.
when we say that, it's quite range. Yeah, independent living centers are sort of built off of the social model of independent living that believes that disability is a natural part of the human condition, and that the biggest barriers that we face aren't necessarily our disabilities, but rather the societal barriers that are put in place. So in a general nutshell, everything that we do works to reduce those barriers and help people with disabilities achieve their independent living goals. About myself, I have worked in the nonprofit field for almost 30 years now and I really hate saying that when I do because I realize how old I am. I've been at, I just celebrated my 15th year here at Independence. I've been in the independent living world for 25 years. Um, I'm a little bit of a policy nerd myself. I'm a little bit of a nonprofit nerd, and I enjoy kind of being around and doing these things. So this job fell into me and was really kind of the right place for me when I had the opportunity to do it.
Very cool. I kind of relate to a lot of those sentiments. I feel like this is a huge topic these days, and there's so much opportunity out there for doing good and trying to, when in a world where things aren't always great these days, I feel like independent living and educating people on how this all fits into the workplace, especially, is important. Talk a little bit about like the different kind of services and what ranges you see from people you help.
Yeah, and you're right. It's so much. There is so much going on in the world today, and it can feel like there's so much to kind of bite off and to chew and to process and
Yeah.
everything else that it can at times see that it's hard to kind of narrow down and just work on a few things. And that is something we try to do. And I do this, as I said earlier, we are a locally controlled center for independent living. So the advantage of that is that we have the ability to kind of um, adjust our services to meet local needs. And I appreciate that. So when I talk about some of the services that we provide, it's really going to be under that caveat that this is what our local board of directors and through our strategic plans and stuff like that have decided are the most important priorities. So when I talk about like how we do it, and I usually like to do this almost in a little bit looking at age groups.
Mhm.
Not that this is exclusive, but it's probably where our most services go. So we'll start off with our primary young folks, which
Okay.
not the 4 month old, but rather we have a large program that we work with high schoolers on, and it's a program in collaboration with local school districts and North Dakota Vocational Rehabilitation to provide um, youth with disabilities sort of pre-employment skills. And the why behind this, I like to tell Jen, is that when I was a younger advocate and was working, I was really frustrated by dealing with 40-year-old people who maybe didn't have the life skills that they needed.
Yeah.
And whereas of course we'll provide those services, I always ask myself, like, how did we end up at this point where this person didn't have these and they got all the way to this point? And I thought so much in sort of your non-apparent disabilities, just that people that maybe you weren't quite able to see how they were struggling or see how
Mhm.
they were where they were doing it. So I began to do this. It was actually one of the conditions when I took this job here at Independence that I was going to bring that program. I had studied it at other places and kind of knew a little bit about it, and we launched it eventually. Fortunately, vocational rehabilitation began to spend a certain amount of their dollars where they focus on just this. And so in that program, we work on pre-employment skills training. So everything from obviously employment skills, which are extraordinarily important,
Mhm.
to self-advocacy skills, to sort of helping them with peer mentoring. So our staff that work in that program kind of work through with these youth on kind of gaining the skills that they need to live independently and to launch them into successful adulthood. And it's interesting, even as I say that, I have two sons. One of my sons actually went through this program, and one of my sons did not. And my one who did not the other day was working on filling out his first apartment application, and he's like, I don't know how to do this. I was never taught to do this. And I thought to myself, that's the kind of thing that is literally one of the lessons in our plan that
Yeah.
we do, is to work with things like how do you apply for an apartment and what do you look for and all that stuff. So just
Yeah.
those things that many of us struggle with. So that's our youth programming. The next population is uh, we again responding to a local need. We really began to see a need because of issues around addiction,
Hmm.
and how can we as a Center for Independent Living sort of mold together independent living services and recovery based programming. So we have a large amount of adults that we serve who are struggling with addiction, who are struggling with severe mental health issues,
Hmm.
and we work on them to help them with things like employment and housing, and again advocacy, and again, staying away from the criminal justice system, making better healthy decisions and things like that, and working with them on a very you know sometimes intense basis to kind of help them learn the life skills that maybe they didn't have, or maybe that they struggled with. So that's a big chunk of that. And also within adults beyond the addiction community is sort of our core services of independent living skills, advocacy, and things like that, working with all adults on sort of um, kind of getting the skills they need. And it's so interesting. Whenever I talk about this, nobody's ever walked into my center and said, I'm here to get independent living skills.
Right, right.
It'd be really weird if they did that. But what they'll say is, I need help budgeting,
Yep.
or I need help figuring out how to organize my life,
Yep.
or they'll have these things that they'll talk about that they're struggling with. And then our staff will work with them to try to work through that. And even when I talk about advocacy, it's funny. When I first got this job and I heard about advocacy, I honestly thought I was going to be this like, I'm going to be helping people file complaints left and right. I'm going to be helping people. I really almost look at it more like from a legal
Yeah,
standpoint.
yeah, yeah.
And I'm not saying we never do that, and we don't point people in the right direction of how to do that. But a
Mm.
lot of our job is helping people fill out forms,
Yep.
because it's like they have an ability to do this, but just the complexity of how to do this. And one of the things I tell my staff is that the folks that we serve, they're experts on their own lives. Our job is to be experts on things that we shouldn't expect them to be. And I don't know how we can expect somebody, who has a physical disability and living on Medicaid to be an expert on how to fill out Medicaid forms.
Right.
It's just too complex.
It
and
is, and it's too complex even for like lawyers sometimes to
well,
figure
and
out.
oh, believe
So,
me,
yeah,
we we're constantly learning as well.
yeah, yeah.
And then and then the final population that we work with, and again, this isn't exactly for older folks, but a
Right.
lot of times older folks are living with physical disabilities, or sometimes other people have physical disabilities too. And we work with them to help prevent them from going into nursing homes, or if they're in a nursing home, to help them transition home.
Okay.
And that's been a massively growing program. As you may be aware, in 2019, but December of 2019, the state of North Dakota entered into an agreement with the Department of Justice on a homestead settlement.
Hmm.
And they, for lack of a better term, North Dakota agreed to reassess and improve how they provide home and community-based services.
Hmm.
And that has been an absolute game changer, the biggest game changer in my advocacy career, for helping people live at home. The number of people that we're able to assist now, and the number of people that stay at home that used to go to nursing homes is significant.
Really?
And so we do a lot of work in that program. So those are just kind of the three different areas that we work with, and we do a whole bunch beyond that as well.
So it's interesting too that it's almost the skills everyone should need, but even someone who's impacted by a disability is just this bigger barrier, like just getting to that point. And I often hear these days, well, someone should just go get a job or someone should just go do these things. And I'm like, do you understand how much money and it takes to get an ID and all these things that are in their way of people that want to do that? And it seems like your program is one that really helps them do that step one, two, three to be able to get to the point where they're independent living.
I really hope so. It's interesting. I heard years ago, and when I first heard this, I'll be honest, I was maybe a little offended by it. But the more I thought about it, I realized how true it was. And it said, disability steals time. And
Mhm.
it's really true. It doesn't matter what your disability is. It just takes time. It takes time out of your day. It takes time to explain. It takes time to navigate. And so when you look at that, your disability is already stealing some of your time. And then you're having to navigate the normal things in life that are difficult. And it just sort of piles on. And all of a
Yep.
sudden, your time and energy is just a lot more limited. And unfortunately, it creates this. silent discrimination of low expectations, where we give people a break and we're like, oh, we understand that, you have a disability. Maybe you don't need to be in the workforce, or maybe you don't need to participate at the same level. Um, I say let's work on removing those barriers so that you
Mhm.
can do it, rather than just accepting that lower standards. And you're right. I deal with that all the time. And I'm also an employer, Jen. I've had, a lot of interviews in my life and a lot of resumes I've read and things like that. And I recognize the fact that a lot of adults really do struggle with those things, with or
Mhm.
without disabilities.
Yeah.
So what can we do to give that person with a disability an advantage during that process? Let's ensure that they have the best resume possible. Let's ensure that they're prepared for that interview. Um, if we're going to ask an employer to accommodate somebody, let's help get somebody in that chair so that they can actually make the accommodation request. So we want to do everything we can to kind of shorten that up and be able to address that, because then people can go to work. And again, employment skills, self advocacy skills, the human things that people need in order to become successful. I am always going to be an advocate for employment,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah, yeah.
but I also recognize employment barriers that exist, and it's not just. I mean, sometimes it is I don't have transportation, or I don't have right clothes, or but sometimes there's other things that we can help kind of work on as well.
Do you do any training for employers? Because I do find that employers have this, at least they used to. I'm hoping they're getting better. This like one size fits all mentality when really there's a lot of ways you can relate to different abilities.
Yeah, first off, we do absolutely provide training to employers, technical assistance and things like that. And in fact, right now, as we speak, I've got a survey going out to employers to kind of get their input. I'm really excited. I hope I get good feedback from that, because we want to use it to adjust our services, but also use it as a fig leaf to ask those employers that if you want our help, we'll help you. And,
Yeah.
and I think that part of this is the evolution of the workplace. And if you look at how much the workplace has evolved in the last 5 years, first off, things like remote work have become so much more acceptable, and people use it, which it can be a tool and accommodation for some people with disabilities. The other thing is that the workforce shortage that we're experiencing has forced employers to maybe be a little more innovative and creative with how
Yep.
they work with employees. And that also fits into a mold better. Now, I make the argument as somebody that my educational background is in business management and leadership, that we should have been doing that for a long time. That going back, that all employers should always be flexible with people. And I've joked for many years when I do this training, I'm like, I don't actually want you to have a good ADA policy. My preference is that you have a good employee policy that fits everything. So
Mhm.
let's look at within a workspace, like what do each employee individually need, and can we make adjustments? And I get it. There's some places that isn't practical. There are some places that some things aren't allowable. That's fine. But when it is allowable, when you can make modifications or changes, and it can help you create a better workplace for everybody. So
Yeah, I think your survey is great. If you're an employer out there and you get in the Independence Inc. survey, I already filled it out last week, and it's a
thank you.
fantastic survey that makes you at least think, like, what is my workplace doing and what do I need help with? And so
Yep.
just a plug for that quick if you get it filled out. But yes, I think the workplace, I agree with you. Like, I think 20 years ago, people should have been thinking about remote work and thinking about how to make a lot of different things happen. And so the fact that we have a workforce shortage, we have people who could fill that shortage with the right
Yep.
design, basically. So,
Well, and I've made that argument for years. We in North Dakota, we've had a pretty big workforce shortage for years, and I will give a lot of credit too. North Dakota has either the highest or second highest rate of employment for people with disabilities in the country. We should be proud of that. We're doing a lot of really good things. But at
mhm.
the same time, there's a significant gap between the employment rate of people with disabilities and people without disabilities. So if we can take that next 5% and close that gap just a little bit more,
Mhm.
that's a huge impact both on improving workforce, but also getting people into the workforce. Which is something that's very common right now, is how can we get people more self-sufficient and more independent and off government services? I agree with all of that.
Yep.
I would love to see as much as that we can do as possible, and I want to celebrate that when we can do it. But I also need to recognize it's hard, and we don't do that by shaming people or by just you know
Right.
expecting them to do it. We have to work through the barriers and help them achieve it.
And you have to invest resources so that in the long term, it's actually less expensive and less
100%. And,
costly.
and and that's really a great way to summarize all of independent living, is that the more independent people are, the more autonomy people are, the less it costs. but
Yep.
it does sometimes cost a little bit more in the short term.
Yep.
It does cost, and all of our services are set up here at Independence to be temporary. We are not meant to be long-term case managers for people. We're meant to have people come to us, work through their goals, hopefully achieve them, and move on. That is really the model that we have. And then we'll go and work on the next person. Now, does everybody do that? Of course not. This isn't some, Pollyanna world where everybody does everything. That's okay. You can come back when you're ready. We have all set goals in our life that we haven't met. It's usually right around like New Year's or like the 3rd of January when people have failed on their New Year's resolutions.
Yep.
It happens that way with independent living goals sometimes too.
That's interesting. I saw that with bankruptcy work a lot. It was always the New Year's resolutions to get out of
Is
debt.
that right?
Yeah, as a bankruptcy attorney. It was my busiest day of the year. It's interesting.
Wow.
What are you seeing right now as the biggest gaps in the system that need resources? Where are these gaps at right now? And especially in
Um,
yeah.
I would say permanent supportive housing for people experiencing homelessness would be my number one
Okay.
thing.
Yeah.
I just think that, it's hard because here in Minot, we have, and it was in the region that Independent serves, we have, we don't have a lot of options for like short-term shelter. And
Mhm.
when you don't even have short-term shelter, you have a harder time with long-term permanent housing. And then even when there is that permanent housing, there isn't necessarily the services and supports there to ensure that somebody doesn't have a relapse into homelessness. And
Right.
so I think that's probably one of the biggest barriers that we're dealing with. And my number two would be transportation.
Okay.
I'm doing a lot of work around transportation right now. But transportation also it's a double-edged sword here a little bit because part of it is there's a lack of funding and a lack of routes and a lack of and all that. But on the other side, there's a lack of acceptance that public transportation is needed. There's a
Mhm.
lack of understanding of how to use it. And there's even a lack of promoting it. I mean, I have been working as much with providers and stuff like that on. Do you guys even know how to use public transportation? Do you understand how it works? Because, I mean, it can just be a game changer for independent living if people can get around a community.
Right. Right. And it does get overlooked a lot, especially when you're talking about funding and resources and things like that, of how useful that can be. Again, it's a domino effect. It affects then the costs for not having enough in the workplace, not having enough people buying things at stores because they can't get to the stores. It's small businesses. It's everybody gets impacted by it. So
Absolutely.
yeah, as I go off on my economic impacts rants. Speaking of economic, so you're a nonprofit. Are you grant based? How are you funded?
Yeah, we have it's actually funny because when I started this job 15 years ago, we had really two funding streams. And today I think we have 9 or 10.
Yeah.
So it's a variety of different ways. We get a variety of different fee for service programs or grants from both the state and local governments, doing a variety in different aspects of all of those. And then also we are a private nonprofit, so we have some fundraising aspects and things like that. And we really appreciate the fundraising aspect of it because it gives us that money comes a little bit more flexible,
Yep.
allows us to actually meet our needs and meet the needs of the people we serve a little bit more.
Mhm.
Whereas the opposite of that is, of course, government funding, which usually comes with tons of bells and whistles or, problems and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And, a big part of our day is spent trying to manipulate that properly to be both ethical and legal and meet our needs as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting how much work goes into managing some of those sometimes. It's something I learned when I came to legal services from private practice was how much goes into
Yeah.
work and
It's,
documenting everything.
it's my friends that don't work in the government with government grants and stuff like that. I'm always reminding them of how blessed they are because, yeah, I don't have that flexibility that they do at times,
Yeah.
and that's okay. I mean, it keeps us focused on what we need to be doing, but at the same time, I mean, it can be really difficult.
Yeah. Very resource intensive to
Yeah.
manage. So you talked a little bit about fundraising. If people want to donate or be involved with fundraising, how can they find you?
Yeah, so our website, Independent CIL, as in Center for Independent Living.org, has donate here buttons. Right now, we are raising money for our Beyond program, which is our youth-based program.
Okay.
Going along with what you said, there's changes coming to that program to where I don't even know if I said this, but we do that program in I think 20 to 22 on the average year rural school district. So obviously our staff drive there, and there's some changes coming that are significantly limiting our funding for that. So we're working on raising money to keep that program going next year. We were able to save it for this year, but it's kind of a year by year basis for one of our most successful and most loved programs. So there's a link on there for Beyond, or you can just make an independence donation as well. Throughout the year, we also have different fundraisers going on. If you're from our area, we will have in the spring of the year, we'll be having our Chili Bowl fundraiser, which is our biggest fundraiser every year. And we have different restaurants coming and compete for as the best chili, and it's a lot of fun. So yeah, there's always opportunities for that.
Very cool. Well, I will make sure to put that link in our show notes as well for today. Everyone can see that. And I feel like we could talk all day. There's so many things that we cross over with legal services and independent living and all of the things in there. But I also want to keep this at a reasonable length. So anything else you would like to put out there, anything that's upcoming or any programs, anything like that?
I think the big thing is that independent living can be a good tool within a community. We're significantly underfunded. We don't pretend that we can do everything for everybody, but we also don't say no to too many things. Unless we're just overwhelmed and we can't get time on our schedule or something, but we try our best to say yes and to be a part of the solution. And so, whether you're in the northwestern quadrant of the state where independent serves or the other three centers, I just think that we want to be a partner in making our communities better. We want to be partners in helping people and things like that, and kind of trying to solve problems within our local areas.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you, Scott. I appreciate your time this morning and
Yes.
sharing all about what you all do at Independencing. It's great.
All right. Thank you so much, Jen. I appreciate this.
Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next week on LSND Live Community Conversations.